Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalatu wassalamu ala Rasulil Kareem. Welcome to IBA Center for Excellence in Islamic Finance. I'd like to welcome all the participants, the panelists. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and thank you for joining us today with the seminar on Islamic FinTech, blockchain technology, and its role in financial inclusion. We are very happy and pleased to organize this seminar, and we have two very senior experts on Islamic finance, and we have Mr. Bilal Rasul Saab, who is the Executive Director, and he's heading the Islamic Finance Department at SECP. And we have Mr. Ashar Nazim, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Aion Digital Bahrain. Both participants, both speakers which we have joined, who have joined us today, they carry a vast experience of Islamic finance. Then they have the role in the policy making. They have played a critical role in promotion of Islamic finance. So I like to thank Bilal Rasul Saab and Ashar Nazim Saab for joining us today. This webinar is organized by IBA CEIF in collaboration with Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. And it's on a very important topic of how we can use technology, how we can use the modern trends to enhance the financial inclusion in for Islamic finance, especially in the context of Pakistan, and also in a broader context at the global level, how we can take the reach of Islamic finance to a new heights, how we can reduce the challenges that Islamic finance face. The customers face the challenges where they are not able to reach the services offered by Islamic financial institution. So our focus today is, let's share and listen from the experts how Islamic finance can be beneficial, how we can increase the reach of Islamic finance, how we can include a greater population, Muslim population, as well as those who are interested in ethical finance through the use of financial technology, through the use of blockchain and the emerging trends. So I'll start the seminar with a recitation of Holy Quran. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Sadaqallahu azim. So once again, I like to welcome all the participants. I like to also mention that this webinar is also broadcasted live on the Facebook. You can see on the IBSC Facebook page, as well as all the participants who have joined us today on Zoom. So you can ask the question from the panelists. You can use the chat box option to write your questions, and we will try to answer some of the questions during the talk, and we will take some of the questions towards our panelists, and they will be, inshallah, they will be answering those questions. So without further delay, I like to invite our first speaker for his welcome note and his thoughts about fintech, financial inclusion, and the role that SECP as a policy maker is doing. So I'd like to invite Mr. Bilal Rasul Saab, who is the Secretary to the Commission and Policy Board, Executive Director of SECP, and Head of Islamic Finance, a seasoned expert, a regulator, supporter of Islamic finance. So Bilal Rasul Saab, thank you for joining us, and I'd like to invite you to say to your opening remarks.
Jazakallah. Thank you, Ahmed. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. As-salatu was-salamu alayka ya Rasulullah. Sadaqallahu azim. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry if you just so excuse me for that. It's the position I'm at. I have to receive phone calls. Yeah, so this is our second webinar in collaboration with IBA, and incidentally, the first seminar was also on financial inclusion and fintech. And I'm not going to say too much. I'd rather hear from Ashar. It's an honor to have Ashar with us, though I have not been in touch with him, to my dismay and my regrets. But since he's here today, I will like him to take up the majority of the time. Ashar, we had an initial webinar pretty much on the same lines as what we are speaking today. I think we had additionally Sukuk was another theme in the last webinar. But I'm just going to very briefly, without boring the participants who might be here for the second time, who were there in the first webinar as well. I'm just going to touch upon what I'm just going to give you my thoughts on what I think about Islamic FinTech and financial inclusion. What I said in the last webinar was that the punchline was that disruption by financial technology, and especially in Islamic financial technology, is going to be sooner than we think. And there are very exciting times right now. In fact, it's so quick that RegTech will be having problems because the products and the solutions out there are coming in very rapidly. In terms of the regulatory environment at SECP, we just have a sort of what we call a regulatory sandbox in which there's all kinds of crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, and other types of startups that are just messing around in the sandbox. We don't have an environment as such, and as a regulator, I think RegTech is especially important. And like I said last time, we don't want to be too late in the regulation and supervision of this, a completely new era of innovation that's going to come in. Yes, what we would like to see from the market is, all kinds of solutions in which, especially the unbanked and the faith-driven investors and savers, they can have solutions, especially low-cost funds, and through fintech, I think a lot of the the middleman and the intermediaries that make a lot of commissions and drive up the cost of funds, I think they can be eliminated. And then it's, I personally feel the responsibility of the state to support such a system. It would have to come from the state, in which, I had explained in the last webinar that there are some things, or some products such as mini Sukuk, the peer-to-peer lending, which starts at 500 rupees of financing. So we can come up with mini Sukuk. There is a green Sukuk out there. So I had suggested, a brown Sukuk and an orange Sukuk for the poor and for the agriculturists, but very small as compared to the larger corporate Sukuks, in which, the small saver and investor can sort of, if it's sovereign backed or if it's sovereign sponsored, I think that is where we can make inroads into. And it would give Islamic finance the new dimension and the new perspective it really needs in Pakistan. A couple of days ago, I was speaking with one of the universities, and I was telling them that it's not really awareness creation in Pakistan; it's confidence building that is required. And maybe this is an area where, and I think it's an opportune time where the state can come in and give Islamic finance a whole new complexion, as far as again goes, kickstarting the Islamic finance initiative, because we sort of, Islamic banks have done phenomenally in Pakistan, but still not at that place. And in terms of milestones, I think we're still not there. It could have been a much larger market than we already have right now. So a lot of potential there. Islamic FinTech is definitely the solution. I'm going to hand it over to you, Ashar. We would like to hear your thoughts, and then I always have a preference for interactive sessions, and if there are any questions, I think we should take on questions and try to make this a little more interactive as well. But Ahmed will tell you how much time you have, but over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bilal Saab, for your introductory remarks and highlighting the critical role for Islamic FinTech and especially the RegTech or the regulatory involvement in the promotion of these new technologies. Now, without further delay, I would like to invite Mr. Ashar Nazim Saab for his expert talk on this subject. Ashar is is a known figure in Islamic finance. MashaAllah, he has contributed a lot. He has served in different key positions with Central Bank of Bahrain, ENY, and there's a whole list of his achievement, mashallah, and over probably 25 years of experience of Islamic finance at different capacities. And now his latest passion is technology and Islamic finance. So I think he's the most suitable person to highlight and guide us on this. So thank you, Ashar, once again for joining us today. And now the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Nahmadu nusalli ala Rasul al-Kareem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Thank you very much, Ahmed. Always good to see you. Bilal Saab, really good to see you again. And thank you for the hospitality last time. And again, good to be here in this forum today as well. I think you've set the tone right with a lot of very pertinent points. And that is about, how can we, Ahmed mentioned, how can we increase the reach of Islamic finance is the more pertinent question today. You mentioned about the RegTech, and I believe that that's absolutely fundamental. And whether we are in FinTech or Islamic FinTech, if we are a student of Islamic finance, it's very important to broaden our horizon and understand what these RegTech and EdTech and HealthTech and FinTech mean. And that confidence building will definitely come once we start implementing some of these initiatives in a very small manner. Very briefly, if I can set the tone of the session today. So in my last 4 years, of course, as Ahmed mentioned, I've got some experience with EY, with the central banks, with the public sector. And 4 years back, I decided to enter technology space, not knowing anything about technology. And the reason was, like Ahmed, like Bilal Saab, I'm absolutely convinced that the next phase of proliferation of Islamic finance is only going to come if we have the right business model in place. So what that means is the first gen or the last 50, 60, 70 years of Islamic finance was more about, understanding what the governance is going to look like, what the product structures are going to look like. And that we've achieved to a big extent, and kudos to us, right? I mean, so that's really well done. But really the next phase of success is going to be about how do you democratize this finance? How do you really spread the reach? And how do you tackle some of the fundamental issues which are inherent to the financial services industry? How do you address those as a result of exponential technologies that we are seeing? So 4 years back, I gave up my partnership at EY to start this venture. And to share with you, in the last 4 years, we've put together a team of primarily Pakistanis, I must say, who've helped build the first independent challenger bank in UAE that is going to get launched this year, right? It's a full-fledged retail and commercial bank. And the kind of challenge that was given to us is an Islamic license they have. The kind of challenge given to us was, how do we operate with zero operations team? How do we operate with one branch, right? So, and that, bank is up and running right now and will be announced very soon. We are also working with the second largest Islamic bank in the world, Kuwait Finance House, which is right now, which has chosen us to rewire their entire business around a platform model. I'm going to share some experience from there. We are in very advanced conversations with the Saudi National Credit Bureau, who's saying, you know what? The traditional credit bureau models are out. How can I increase financial inclusion by actually leveraging the kind of transaction data and open banking data that's coming my way, right? We are working with some of the largest retail groups, and this is very interesting in GCC, who are saying, you know what, I've got a footfall of 100 million customers per year, and really I'm leaving a lot of money on the table. How do I get into the financial services space, and I want to be double compliant? So there are some very interesting conversation, and like previous times, I'd like to have a more practical conversation in terms of what is next for as students of Islamic finance. What is next in terms of acquiring skills? What kind of skills are required, right? This session is going to be more about, I'm going to touch on the FinTech and the Islamic FinTech in particular. But it is important for us to understand the why part. Why are we here today? Why does it matter? You're giving a lot of your very expensive time. Why does it matter? And just so that we are all on the same page, what I will say is FinTech, we define FinTech as customer-facing apps, the business models that are built around exponential technologies, right? And in simple terms, around platforms. And I'll talk about it a bit in detail as well. So FinTechs, we are going to talk about in today's session, especially customer-facing business models that are wired around exponential technologies, especially platforms, right? And then we are going to talk about a little bit about Islamic FinTech, or as I say, there's a difference between Islamic FinTech and FinTech for Islamic finance. We're going to talk about that. The objective of this session will be to highlight certain innovative business models which are in play in emerging markets in Middle East and Asia. We are going to talk about why does it matter, because 70%, 80% of skill set that we have today, we've got 70 participants right now, 71, right? And what I will say is, what if I were to tell you that much of the skill set that you've got today is going to be redundant in a very short time period? And it's very important for us to reinvent ourselves, understand what really matters, right? I mean, for the Islamic finance industry. What I would like to do is I would like to leave some thinking points. We will not have answers to everything. Blockchain is a huge topic. FinTech itself is a huge topic, right? So we are going to just touch base upon some elements of it. What my effort will be is to leave certain thinking points for the audience that we can perhaps dwell on in further sessions down the road. This is not going to be about a Sharia debate, and it's not going to be about a technology session, right? This is going to be about laymen like you and me who want to understand how can Islamic finance become relevant to larger masses. So with that, what I will say is, so this is the 4 or 5 key themes I'm going to cover. What is the problem statement? When we are talking to our clients, when we are talking to consumers in the market, there are 3 key problems that are typically highlighted. One is across Middle East, South Asia, there's very low financial inclusion. And in fact, the World Bank says only about 15% of the population across Middle East and South Asia are today banked, right? We are not talking about underbanked or unhappily banked. We're just talking about the unbanked. So massive, right? So huge potential. So the problem statement number 1 is there's low financial inclusion, and we've been talking about this forever. But really, how do we change this? Do we see this getting changed as a result of FinTech business models? Number 1. Number 2, the fact of the matter is, currently the banks, the way they're structured today, they've got a very high cost to acquire and cost to serve. Their cost of customer acquisition is so high that they're not able to do justice in terms of the returns they're able to generate and share with, for example, depositors or investment account holders. Similarly, the amount of cost they incur to serve these customers, especially the the middle class and the lower middle class, is so high that they do not want them to be walking into their branches. So banks by design have, so I'll be talking about a lot of themes here, and each one of them, I tell you, are very powerful themes. And these are themes that we can have, half-day sessions on each theme. But I'm just going to talk about a few points. I'm going to stop at the end of each segment and take a few questions. And then if there are any major heavy questions, of course, I'll direct them to Ahmed. I'm just kidding. But, we'll take it in the end as well. Right? But this is the crux of our experience in the industry, that the high cost of customer acquisition and the high cost to serve these customers have led the banking industry and the Islamic banking industry, the traditional Islamic banking industry, to actually exclude a large part of our population from the financial space, right? And that is a problem that we need to address. And the third one is in Pakistan, especially, and in larger Middle East, you are seeing some strong demand for double compliant financial solution. And what that means is, yes, we want Sharia compliant, but not at the cost of user experience, not at the cost of commercials. So again, it has to be competitive and the best in class, and it has to be Sharia compliant, right? And again, some banks have achieved that status. Many other banks are still struggling. Now, if we agree that these are the three practical problem statements that we are seeing in the market, what we are seeing is also certain potential solutions that we've got, right? And what we are seeing is right now there's a proliferation of customer-facing apps, and apps is a very simplified version of the platform that is at play, that is helping people manage their financial lifestyle, right? And in a Sharia conscious manner. So there are three different parts of it. There are customer-facing platforms that are coming up. They are embedded in the customer's lifestyle. They do not have to stop what they're doing and go walk into a branch and try to do their financial dealings. It's embedded within their lifestyle, and it is being done in a Sharia conscious manner, right? So it is all doable. Why Sharia conscious manner is doable? Because now there are enough products, and now there is enough governance in place for us to understand how to address this market, right? So that is one. So what we are saying is non-banks are going to enter the space, and they're going to take a pie of this business. Number one. Number two, the potential solution we are seeing in the market is banks are now graduating, are now maturing from focusing on automation, which basically meant that my process was A, B, C, D, and E, and I've automated it, to digitalization, which basically means that, you know what, I understand how my customer is spending his time, right? He's spending on average about between 6 and 11 hours on the mobile app, right? He's looking at on average about 50 apps in a month, right? In different apps. So I understand, and therefore I understand how to embed it within their lifestyle. So banks are also moving to digitalization. And a classic example of that is Roshan Digital Account, for example, where you can open a bank account without ever walking into a branch. And similarly, the peer-to-peer that we are seeing from SECP and a number of other initiatives that are coming out, right? And a third potential solution for students of Islamic finance is to differentiate between Islamic FinTech and FinTech for Sharia conscious customers. And how do we differentiate? So Islamic FinTech will be Islamic businesses, which are based on Sharia compliant products and follow Sharia compliant governance. Fair enough, right? I mean, very simple definition that has been achieved. I think most of us understand this. However, the FinTech for Sharia conscious customers, what that means is businesses that are appealing, that are relevant to Sharia conscious customers. And there is less about Islamic and more about understanding of the business model and how do you actually build that appeal, that scale, right? So from this perspective today, what I will do is I will talk about, this problem statement and this potential solution. I'll talk about how it has changed the banking business. What are the risk implications? What are the new expertise required? And because FinTech is a huge area, I'm going to focus on a little bit about open data that is coming into play and which SECP is also very focused on, right? And I'm going to talk about also a little bit about blockchain and then talk about, so what does it mean for Islamic finance industry? Just to do a recap, and some of you may have seen this slide previously as well, every aspect of the banking business model is being disrupted. In very simple terms, if you talk about the deposit industry, banking deposits, we are saying that, the digital wallets like Alipays of the world and Ubers of the world and Kareems of the world are actually taking a share of that market from the banks, right? So yesterday, if I had $100, I was keeping $10 in my pocket and 90 with banks. Today, I'm only keeping 60 with banks and 5 is with Starbucks, 10 is with Kareem, 15 is with Amazon and so forth, right? So the deposit market share is actually shifting from banks to these non-bank apps. Financing, if you talk about it, growing at 50% per annum. Of course, it's a small base. I'm talking about global stats, right? It's a small base, so it's growing very fast. But a number of these fintech businesses have come up and have taken their business away. Why? Because their intermediation cost was a lot lesser as a result of using platform models, right? When you look at trade finance is being reinvented in a massive way, and it's a once in a 50-year opportunity to really position yourself as Islamic financial institution on this trade finance route, right? And what we are saying is the supply chain, the bank payment obligation, the LCs and the LGs of the world are actually moving to the likes of TradeShift, Tolia, Demica, Orbian, a number of these platforms that have been put together by club of different banks, and trade finance has shifted, as a result of which it has brought down both the compliance risk, the cost of doing business, as well as the speed at which these transactions are being executed. And there again, blockchain is very successfully being implemented. And when you look at operations of financial institutions, then robotics is something that you may be familiar with. And what we are saying is right now, so for example, when we are working with banks in Kuwait and Bahrain, what we are saying is by automating some of your processes, your objective, beyond the headlines should be, how can I bring my cost income ratio from 40 or 50% down to 20 and 30%, right? And it is happening. So when we were working with KFH Bahrain, we said, you know what, when you start digitalization, and they're a smaller bank in Bahrain, right? Their headquarters is in Kuwait. So we said start with digital customer acquisition and drive customer adoption on that front. Extremely important, digital identity, right? On this one, they did it, right? And once they did it, we said, okay, now introduce other deposit products, now introduce other financing products, now introduce other card products. As a result, today in 3 years' time, I can share with you that their cost of customer acquisition is down by 80%. Now that's disruption, right? If I can demonstrate that your cost of customer acquisition is down by 80%, their average deposit per customer is up. They are getting more deposits from their platform than all their branches combined, and their cross sell is up by 3 times. Now, when I speak in this business language, there is less to do with Islamic part of it, because the products was there, the governance was there, but that reach wasn't there, right? That experience wasn't there, right? And it took a lot of change of mindset for KFH to accept, to lower their ego and say, yes, I've been in the business forever, but I do not understand everything about digital identity. I do not understand about everything about platform, and I will not be a technology expert overnight. But if I can relate digitalization to this, increasing my customer market access, then it makes a lot of sense, right? So, and I'll keep talking about some of the examples as well. So what are those exponential technologies that are actually making an impact, decisive impact, right? And I will talk about 8 of them, especially 8 plus 1. So blockchain, of course, as we know, in 1990s, internet came up and Pakistan lost out, right? Because we became users of internet rather than shapers of internet. What I will say is blockchain is a very similar revolution in technology space, if not bigger. And right now we've got once in a 30-year reset that is happening. So if our students, and especially students of Islamic finance, and I count myself in there as well, if we can get a hang of how it is relevant and how to be implemented, then you can be the shapers of the industry. Cloud, and that's a very nice phrase of saying that well, it should be centralized data that you should be storing, and the cost will be a lot lesser. And PTCL is coming out with some great data centers at the moment, and the regulators are working towards allowing some of the services to be cloud ready. And I can confirm in Bahrain, for the first time ever, by the way, the first bank, KFH, was allowed to go on international cloud. Till now, banking data could not leave the shore, right? And doesn't matter if you're banking or Islamic, you need to understand all this terminology, right? So we were able to do AWS in Bahrain as well, but it was young. So we had to use the certain services which are there in Singapore. And there was about 3,000 hours that were spent between various teams and the regulator to say that how can the data be shared on the cloud, international cloud, then in a very safe and secure manner, to bring the power of analytics and customer experience to the market here. So for the first time ever, Bahrain has just achieved this in the last quarter, right? So the social is the new theme, and social payments, you will hear more and more going forward. You need to understand what that means. Security, right? It's not a matter of if you will get hacked, it's just a matter of when you will get hacked. And that digital security, you'll have to take a call on that. So, Bahrain is supposed to be one of the more progressive ones, even in the region here. And when they are asked that, have you done your homework? Do you understand fully all the risks? The answer, at some point in time, they had to take a call that, regulations is not going to be what it has been for the last 100 years. Right now, we will never have all the answers. We'll have to take some certain calculated risks. And therefore, they opened up the market a lot faster in terms of open banking, open data, digital identity than other markets, right, on this one. So a calculated risk, how do you take that? Platform, if you do not understand what it means, you are going to be out of business very soon, right? The entire economy, we call it platform economy. The entire business, be it financial or non-financial, are going to get rewired around platforms. In very simple business terms, what that means is till yesterday, all your business components were controlled by you, were internally sourced, were internal to you. In tomorrow's business, 30% of that will be controlled by you, 70% you will be collaborating with the rest of the market. And you have to be very good in collaboration. And banks are not necessarily known for the collaboration skills, right? So the entire Islamic economy is going to get rewired around platforms. In Q2, I can share with you, for the first time ever, you will see an Islamic platform index coming out. We are part of that consortium that are working on it. And to measure that, not just in financial services space, but also in other space, how are these platforms working, what kind of risks, etc., they expose us to. Banking APIs, most of us are familiar with them. In very simple terms, it is about how do two softwares talk to each other. And right now, the boardroom conversation is, well, the legacy systems are not API ready. And even the banks, and no bank, I will say, has quality APIs. In UK, when they introduced open banking about 4 years, 5 years back, it took them 2 years, 3 years for banks to become open banking API ready, to upgrade the quality of their APIs to that minimum regulatory threshold that allows data to be exchanged in a secure manner, right? So banking APIs, sometimes used generically, we give too much credit to ourselves. In fact, this is going to be an evolving area. We don't need to be tech expert, but we need to understand what the minimum requirements are. Intelligent automation and advanced analytics. AI is a used and abused word, right? Artificial intelligence, of course, it starts with business intelligence, machine learning, AI, and so forth. My point is, all of us need to understand the power of data, right? And that is behind it, and everything. But if 4 years I've been now in this business of how to get these Islamic banks into a tech-first era. And if I have to summarize after a lot of definitions, right, and what does digitalization in very simple terms mean? What I'll share with you, what it means is life as we know it and business has gone mobile first. As a result of which, technology platform, as well as the workflows and customer journeys that are built on it, need to be mobile first. And the difference between good and bad is huge. In very simple terms, and so the entire life and business have gone mobile first. For banks, any bank, typically a universal bank, typically has 300 customer journeys, right? 300 customer journeys. No bank has perfected 300 customer journeys as mobile first. Typically, banks identify if they get 10 or 15 mobile first customer journeys in a phenomenal user experience way, they are a great success story. That's all. And banks were investing in this region about $1 million, $2 million per customer journey for automating it in the previous era. And that cost has come down big time. It has become 1/10, 1/20th of the cost right now, right? So, and in also very simple terms, what has happened in financial services world is there are, in the technology space, I'm a non-tech person, in the technology space, there are two major systems that need to work together. One is the system of record where all transaction data, etc. is stored. It's called core banking system, right? And then when you hear this term of digital banking platform, that is about the middle and the front, everything to do with customer facing, the orchestration part, right, etc. This entire digital banking platform is actually called the digital banking engagement platform. It is a system of engagement. It is about how Netflix works today when you switch it off on mobile and open it up on laptop. How does it exactly start? Because it has a save and resume feature built into it. How does Uber or Kareem remember your last trip? Because there's an analytics feature built into it, right? The system, and therefore they route you to a different journey depending on the who you are. So the system of engagement is what the digitalization is all about. So again, I don't expect everyone to remember everything, but I'll share some of the experience. There's will be a lot of thoughts, that I'll throw here, and towards the end we can take some questions as well. I know some of us may have already seen this, but I want you to now, just empty your heads in terms of what you know about banking, and have a look once more at if this is a bank, if this is the future of banking that's coming up, right? It's a 2-minute video on this. Can you hear?
No, we can't hear the
No
voice.
sound,
Yeah,
Ashar.
I believe you cannot hear. That's okay. Have a look at the consumer experience, and I think a lot of it is self-explanatory. I'll stop it in between. So I'll maybe do a voiceover. Now, this is about telling people that I understand how you spent your money in the last 12 months, and today I'll be able to help you better, spend better, save more, right? I'll be able to tell you how much extra you've been able to spend, and therefore, help you you save more, spend smarter, spend on the go, save on the go, categorize your transaction. If your utility bills, agar aapka electricity bill was very high in summer in the last 3 years and less in winter, then now summer is coming, I'll be telling you that, how much you need to save. I can tell you on the go in terms of how much markup or the charge up you are paying, depending on what kind of financing mechanism that you are able to do. You don't have to talk to a relationship manager, etc. on this one. And this is not just about great visuals, right? This is also about the analytics and the engagement, the workflow engine that's built behind it, right? As a result of which, a lot of principles which are true to Islamic finance, like transparency, like governance, like ethics, like trust, is now there, but without a middleman in between. So Apple, I'll just stop here, but Apple has really disrupted, right? Has disrupted how financial services work, and they're not just one, right? Google, you must have heard of them. They're now partnering up with 8 banks, and we don't even know the name of those banks. We don't even care, right? They're introducing financial solutions, and what they're saying is, my kitchen is going to be these 8 banks. In different markets, they will serve me with different products, right? But I will control the customer experience, and therefore I will have power in my favor. Some very interesting talk that need to be looked at. I'll talk about 8 of this trends which you need to understand. And if you understand these, then you understand what the Islamic FinTech world will be all about in future. If you miss out on any of these, then you're lost, right? So let me talk about each one of them with examples. What we are saying is, in the previous world, there was a cost arbitrage. Bigger banks used to have a cost advantage, and smaller players or startup players therefore could not enter. And today, what we are saying is that advantage is being taken away as a result of exponential technology. What does that mean? What that means is, if you look at Monetary Authority of Singapore, they have introduced a national KYC system. Bahrain has just introduced a national KYC system. Saudi is just getting started with it. And what that means is, if I have given my data to one financial institution, then again, through a trusted ledger, all financial institutions upon request should be able to get that access to one truth. And I should not be doing that KYC again and again. So today, what used to happen, bigger banks like Habib Bank or National Bank will have advantage that, I've got a huge branch network, and therefore my cost of customer acquisition, eKYC, is less than smaller banks like Samba or others, or Bank Islami, who may have a smaller network of branches, right? And now what you're saying is, because I've got a central eKYC and I'm able to open the bank account on my mobile, I'm taking that advantage away from bigger banks and making a level playing field for everyone. Again, goes back to what Ahmed was saying. How can we increase the reach of Islamic finance, right? How can we help some of these smaller banks grow very fast? So just to give you, I do not know about Pakistan, but just to give you some data points on Bahrain, the cost of customer acquisition for banks here, for smaller banks, was about $40 per customer. Sorry, it was $100 per customer. And for bigger banks was $40. So between $40 and $100 to acquire one customer. Today, it is down to between $8 and $15 per customer as a result of national KYC system, right? Massive. And all these new apps which are coming up, they don't need this branch network. They don't need all these people. They're able to. So cost advantage that used to be there in favor of bigger banks is now out. Second is the profit pool. How do you derive your profit is also changing. And I'll just give you one example, which is Betterment or Wealthfront, and there are a number of others as well. They are wealth solution, and that is where the SECP licensed entities come into being as well. Till yesterday, what used to happen is if I've got a deposit account, I've got a deposit account, right? I mean, changing it to an investment account takes a lot of effort, manual, it's impossible. Today, with a click of few buttons, you can actually switch between your deposit account and your profit generating or investment account, right? So that permeability has been created. And as a result of which, if you were counting on KG, if once my customer, always my customer, the cost of change is very high, the effort to change is very high, that's been taken away. Experience ownership. What we are saying is product manufacturing and customer relationship will get more and more disaggregated, right? And institutions will have to make a choice. Islamic banks, financial will have to make a choice in terms of, yes, they will do everything, but what will they specialize in? Are they going to specialize in experience, which requires a very different skill set and kind of partners? Or are they going to be great product manufacturers, right? Who will be supplying it to be it Uber or Kareem, who wants to offer microfinance, Islamic microfinance, for example, because they've got a huge capital workforce, or they want to be the product manufacturer and the distributors themselves. So that distinction is going to become more and more clear. Another example is Google, for example. Another example is a lot of these retail outlets who are saying, I control the customer footfall. Why should I give up this customer relationship to the guys there? And the question that we are discussing right now at AOP level is, and this all relates to platform, right? Is what that means is there are two implications. One is on governance, that now because it's a platform, so only 30% of this entire business that I'm doing is in my control. 70% is collaboration, and therefore, how do I manage the governance around that? Number one. Number two, it's about customer. Who owns, now here's a very, very important area. Who owns the customer relationship? Very important. Versus who owns customers' data? And number three is then who owns right to use customer data? Now, when you get into those level of details, what you will see is these questions. So Google has a very different model than Dropbox in terms of the data, privileges that they have, right? And Islamic finance soon will be faced with that, and you will see AOP coming out with their standards very soon on platform banking. And I've talked about platforms already, and what that also means is there will be different types. I'm not going to go in each detail. There are a lot of different business models. Data monetization. Now, I'll dwell more into this particular topic, especially which relates to open data, or what we call in simple language open banking. And that is about, how does this additional data, especially because of COVID, etc., that I'm generating today, can be turned to an advantage for me. And more importantly, how, right? What will it take as business model to actually take advantage of this open banking side? Bionic workforce, what that means is when bots and AI will be used alongside me and you to actually make certain decisions, right? And I'll share with you some very interesting stuff, right? I mean, is that, we should not be talking too heavy stuff, talk ground level practicalities. We did some AI stuff on retail banking on a particular product. And what we were able to do is we were able to analyze last 10 years of history of a bank, credit card customers, and based on which we were able to build certain algorithms. And we were able to therefore go back to the bank and tell them that, guys, in the next 3 months, given the trend of the last 10 years, we can say with 80% accuracy, and I'm talking about a real example, that in the next 6 months, these 10,000 customers you are at the risk of losing. They will become dormant. Now imagine how important this information is for Islamic banks, right? And therefore, instead of focusing their call centers on their 100,000 customers, they can prioritize these 10,000 customers and say, what can I do? Is this important to me? And what can I do to retain them better? So we are starting at ground level with banks talking about very specific, and it's going to be just like last 20, 30 years has been evolution of product by product for Islamic finance. Right now, from a technology perspective, business model perspective, it will evolve again product by product in terms of how you apply these technologies to improve your business outcomes, right? So as a result of this exercise with one of the banks, we were able to tell them that, guys, by the way, you're claiming a lot of credit, but you what, 30% of your credit cards have never been activated. Of the remaining 70, you are at the risk of losing 20% more if you don't do X, Y, and Z. And anytime it's more than 7, actually, I don't know how to build algorithm, right? But I know what results I need, so I can drive. So if you have algorithm, and we partnered up with a Singapore-based firm, because talent GCC maybe is not that much, right? So we were able to partner up with a firm in Singapore and then build that algorithm, and now we're insourcing that IP. And the second product and third product, we are doing it in-house, right? So that is a kind of skill set that students of Islamic finance need to acquire. A systemically important text. It's no point saying here AWS, Google, and all these guys are not important to us, right? Trust me, they are going to be eating your lunch, right? Uber, Kareem, all technology-enabled businesses, right? Mocha Online, a number of others, EdTech, health tech, startups that are coming into Pakistan will have a stake in what we used to call Islamic finance, right? Space. And therefore, these larger ones, the systemically important techs who got massive R&D, we've got to see how we partner up with them. Banks try to resist initially, and like open data, when I'm going to talk about it, it's actually anti-bank. But why have they agreed to it? Because they've resigned to the fact that there is no choice but to bring down this walled garden, bring down the walls, and open up. So collaboration with them. Financial regionalization, that's a great opportunity for Pakistan and for the region, right? So we used to hear globalization, one size fits all, no longer is the case. China has taken a very different model approach to consumer finance versus what Europe has done on open banking, versus what USA has done on payment. So what I'm saying is each market will prioritize and will come up with its own version of how to apply some of these technologies, right? And therefore we have a real opportunity not just to imitate, but to actually innovate as well. Now, those were the 8 key factors that we need to understand the implications on the business model of Islamic finance, financial institutions. Now, I'm going to put it in a graphic format in what will become the business model of banks, right? So here is how we see it in our last 4 years of experience of working this space. What we are saying is there is this new thing called the platform, the digital banking platform or the digital banking engagement platform that's coming up. And that will cut to size the role of core banking system or the system of record. That'll become about 20, 30%. 70% will be how do I engage with different segments, right? On top of this, very flexible, very forward-looking platform, technology platform, you'll still have those traditional financial products. And Islamic finance industry, we already have perfected a number of these products, right? I mean, variants of deposits, variants of financing products, etc., are already there, right? So the change is the digital engagement platform. On top of it, what you have to introduce is a number of new experiences. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is you should be able to open a bank account in 5 minutes. Now, I've opened a Rasul digital account as well. But I must say that although it's a huge improvement, it's still not there. Today, I can open a bank account in international market in 5 minutes, end to end. And we build that system as well. And many others have built that system as well. Rasul digital account still took me about 2 days. And it took me, to print out the, what do you call it? The common reporting standard form, etc., etc. Right? And so the customer journey, for a number of reasons, right? For a number of good reasons. So we are still in that journey. What I'm saying is these experiences need to evolve. All right. And you need to decide. You cannot be on paper. You may say, yeah, I'm going to play in every space. But each one of us need to decide which space is it that you're going to specialize in. So eKYC and therefore digital customer acquisition, are you going to be the best? Are you going to embed yourself in the customer's lifestyle? Right. So chahe wo Imtiaz or there's another supermarket or whatever it is, or hotels. So how am I going to embed myself in the lifestyle of the customers, so that whether they're using Spotify, whether they're doing Square, whatever they're using, I'm embedded in that. That's experiences. And that leads me to the third level, which we call ecosystem. And the blue and the green, depicts that some of those ecosystems you will be in control, but more likely than not, you will be a participant in that ecosystem. And therefore, you need to have people who understand the real economy and financial economy. very well and able to bridge and become relevant to those ecosystems. And again, I go back to the principles of Islamic finance, the spirit of Islamic finance. Legally, we are, yes, Sharia compliant today, but all of us understand that's a journey where we are trying to become in spirit Sharia compliant as well, right? How do we get to the bullseye? And one of the key components there, key elements there was clear. How does Islamic finance help bridge the real and financial economy? And here is where we see a game emerging, which will be a classic game. And if you are not able to, then you will become an irrelevant part of the Islamic finance industry if you're not able to manage these ecosystems as institutions and professionals. So let me stop there. I know, I don't expect all of us will be able to get everything, but I hope I've been able to provoke certain thinking before I get into another interesting idea that's being embraced by Islamic banks big time, which is open data or open banking. Ahmed, is the pace okay? Am I putting people to sleep or should I continue?
No, yeah, we are very much enjoying.
So let me then take about 15 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes on open data. And every one of us have probably heard about this at a high level. We are right now in the process of getting a CBB license as an open banking entity, and we are helping the National Credit Bureau in Saudi build an open banking proposition. So we've had the opportunity to look at it a little bit deeper. And I feel this is another, in addition to platform, this is the second disruptive theme that will help us achieve our objective of financial inclusion. And UK is the market, is the global leader in this. You must look at Open Banking Implementation Entity, OBIE. If you're not following that on LinkedIn, please do. We've learned a lot from them. And in simple terms, why did UK become successful in open banking? Because the tone was set right and it was regulatory driven, right? So one is they came up with the regulations on how in very simple terms, this is about how the data will get exchanged between various parties in a controlled, systematic manner, right? In very simple terms. And then the second part is, as a result of this exchange of data, a lot of new players, you're going to break the monopoly of larger banks or a small group of banks, and you're going to open up the market for innovation with all these new customer-facing apps that are coming up. In a controlled, systematic manner, you'll allow them to actually serve these customers, different needs of these customers, right? But when we looked at certain other markets, including in GCC, they were not as successful as UK. Why? Because we believe, one is the motto was right. Motto was, how do we break the monopoly, increase financial inclusion, increase competition, right? So these are not just words, these were the driving objective, number one. Number two, once the regulatory framework was in place, they actually funded and asked the 9 largest banks in UK to actually fund they set up a centralized implementation entity. Why? Because it was not easy, and it took them 2 years, 3 years for all the banks to actually upgrade their APIs to become open data ready, right? To be able to actually share their data in a certain other markets who left it to individual banks were not able to achieve this. It's taking them a lot longer. They're struggling badly, including Bahrain, right? They're struggling, right? And they're now correcting themselves. So the implementation entity is very important. And I'll talk about the objective of the next 10 minutes will be to give you a flavor of what kind of business models are actually working. First and foremost, let's talk about the why, right? I mean, from a business perspective. So the open data or open banking that we're talking about is serving a few objectives, and you have to absolutely 200% either believe in it or don't go for it. And that is about, that many of the larger banks have gone complacent. We need to innovation is coming from different actors. We need to open up the market and give them a playing field, a level playing field. Just like what Islamic finance was all about, right? It was talking about give us a level playing field because we are competing with the much bigger boys. Now what we are saying is, there's a huge segment of the market that's coming up other than traditional Islamic or conventional banks. Open up the market for them because customers love them more than banks. And I think, forget about our vested interest. I really feel this will break this disconnect between real economy and financial economy, right? The idea was to increase competition. The idea is to increase financial inclusion, right? I mean, by bringing down cost to acquire and cost to serve. Trust me, those are two very, very important KPIs, and all the boardrooms are driven by them, right? and then greater efficiency in the banking system. So these are the strategic objectives, as a result of which markets that have succeeded are the ones where it is driven by regulations. Why? Because the incumbents are absolutely not open to give up their monopoly till the regulators ask them to. And in fact, in UK, the government asked, the regulator asked the 9 largest banks to actually fund this implementation entity so they can come up with the minimum API standards, etc. So that will allow the data exchange to happen. And there are some very pertinent questions that are being asked, right? I mean, in terms of, so, which means now I'm going to talk about from a practical industry perspective. So banks are saying, okay, so open banking is coming. It's all nice words, but tell me how it is going to be done. And, do you understand the challenges I face? And what they are saying is, as banks, help me understand, how do I access this data from other banks? Will it be masked? Will it be customer names? How exactly is it going to happen? Now, then they're asking, okay, once I've acquired that data, what do I do with it? Right? And what do I do with it? How do I provide, some valuable insights to customers? And I will not be a perfect in everything. I have to choose my playing field, and then I have to be very good in, but how do I provide that? And then, you know what, Mr. Regulator, you're asking me to open up my business, but the minute I open my business, all the most profitable areas are going to get picked up. Payments is going to go away, right? Deposits is going to go away. I mean, am I mad? Why should I be doing this? So on one hand, as Islamic finance practitioners, we are talking about inclusion, but on the other hand, we are very protective of our business, right? So these are the questions, and it's very interesting how open banking has become from anti-bank to actually bank-friendly. I'll talk about that as well. Then there were new entrants, a separate set of stakeholders, new entrant in financial services, right? The likes of Kareem, Uber, Mocha, EdTech, Health Tech, that kind of stuff. And what they're saying is, we are very small. We can't afford to spend all this money. Help us make this KYC and anti-money laundering using open data a lot easier and a lot more cost-friendly, right? How do I get access to the transactional data that that the clients have, right? I mean, help me understand that. How do I, this payments, right? I mean, now, Bilal Saab, for example, or Ahmed, for example, today, if I were to tell you, let's make MasterCard and Visa redundant, what is your reaction going to be? Ahmed, I can take the liberty to pick on you.
I like that.
Okay.
Let's do it.
It's coming, right? It's coming as a result of open data, and I'll talk about how bank-to-bank transfer. So I was in Riyadh last week, and I was talking to Al Hukair Group, which is one of the larger groups, and they said, I've got 100 million plus footfall. And I said, and X million transactions in a year. And I said, how much are you paying to MasterCard Visa? They said 2.7%. I'm like, what if I'm able to save that for you? And that goes directly to your bottom line. They asked, when can I start? Right? So they want double compliant. Islamic products and governance are in place, but now we're talking about how do I increase this reach of my business and go back to what I've been saying, the spirit of Islamic finance. How do I break this disconnect between real and financial economy, right? And it's happening. The model is in place now. And Visa and MasterCard are not sleeping. They understand this. They're already addressing this, and they're reinventing themselves as well. Right. There are a number of aggregators that are coming up. All right. They're separate, and then there's a regulator coming who's asking, guys, easier said than done. How do I set up the open data infrastructure? And some markets have done it a lot better than others. So once we ask these questions, asking the right question is very important to set the answer right, to get the answer right. Once we ask this question, then to simplify it, and this is our last 10 months of trying to understand all these terminology and so forth. Open banking product portfolio, and the right word should be open access or open data, is about 4 key clusters of solution that you will provide. One is that you will come up with a gateway that provides access to customers' account information, payments account information to be specific, right? So all the data, so if I have 5 different banks that I'm banking with, then as an open banking customer, I should be able to see it on one app, all my accounts across these 5 banks in a nicely categorized, sensible manner. The entire engagement between customers and banks is changing as well. The era of those boring customer, bank statement is over. In a lot of these markets is changing very quick, right? So categorization in a very sensible way across banks, not just in your local market, but also in the region slowly and others as well, just as integration is happening. So account information gateway is a very powerful product portfolio. You need to get familiar with this. Islamic banks also need to get familiar with payment initiation. And what that means is take the middleman out, Visa and MasterCard out, and do a bank-to-bank transfer. Wallets are sometimes storing and sometimes not storing, but they're already trying to do that, right? And now this is happening at a much bigger level, and what and I'll show in a visual as well. And then there are premium services. Now this should be very relevant to Islamic finance students. And what these services mean, there are a lot of examples of that. What that means is today, when I'm giving financing to a certain person, I'm saying, here, how much salary do you get? And therefore you are worth this much of financing. But today, if I've got his payment transaction data of the entire last 2 years or 3 years, right? Imagine what, if I can make sense out of that data, I can understand here, you know what, he's spending so much on holidays, he's spending so much on his wife's jewelry, he's so much on cars, etc., right? Especially in a country like ours, where the undocumented economy is big. Now, this kind of data, and if FBR is able to really put that project in action in terms of how, at point of sale, etc., monitoring the transaction, imagine the kind of credit files that you can build, and we call it light credit files, which means you don't have to do extensive due diligence, etc. Yeah, I mean, if you want to, small credit, a lot of people are credit worthy, but salary is not an indication of that, right? And now you've got alternative data with this. So there are a number of use cases, one of them being credit files as well. Right? And the fourth one for new jurisdiction that just getting started with open banking is the infrastructure solution. Now I'll talk about what that means. And the way that, again, going back to the questions we asked ourselves, right? That for banks, the challenge is these three that we identified. How is it solved? Each one of them is solved either by account information gateway or payment initiation gateway or certain premium services, right? That you can resolve this question. What does the business model look like on a page? Very simply put, what I'll say is this is the banking architecture. So this is the legacy banking infrastructure at the bottom. What you need to do is, again, the data is a massive nightmare right now. No one is able to solve it, not even in the best of markets. But what you are saying is, can I come up with two sets of APIs? And this will be relevant to SEP and SVP. One is the minimum threshold, which is the regulatory APIs. i.e., मैं ये कह रहा हूं here, I need to, Mr. Bank or Miss Bank, you need to open up your data in a certain structured manner to the market participant, which are licensed by SECP. Right, and they must meet this quality threshold. So especially on eKYC, especially on compliance aspect, etc. So there are a set of APIs that are developed from a regulatory perspective, and then on top of it, there's other value-added APIs. For example, here, can I get how has he paid his mortgage payments over the last 10 years, or how has he paid his car financing payments over the last 5 years, right? Those are the value-added information which may not be, the regulator may choose not to define or not make it mandatory, and they leave it to the banks to share or not share. But once banks see the advantage of sharing this data in a consented manner, it's really helpful. Bottom line is, open banking is about breaking the information silo and giving back control of consumer data back to consumers, and saying, yeah, you have the authority to give permission on who will see your data and not see your data. So just because you're working with one bank A or bank B or bank C does not mean they control and they keep that data, your data with them. You are now enabled to share your data in a structured manner with a number of these apps that are coming up, platforms that are coming up, and some of them may be able to. So in UK, there are now 263, and Bilal, there are 263 third-party users that we call it, third-party providers, which means new players who have specialized in different smaller areas. Here, SME ki accounting services, how am I going to help improve that? Personal financial management, the spending pattern, how am I going to look at that, right? The roundup of savings and therefore helping micro savings, how am I going to do? So there are 263 that have already been licensed, and I see a classic relevance for SEP there. And there are 400 plus more which are in the pipeline. That is why, and what I'm saying is, now imagine if against 20 or 30 or 50 banks, there are another 600 of these solution providers who are specializing in small verticals, whether we call it banks or not, there will be a new definition of banks coming up. Imagine the kind of, when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about anything, imagine the kind of innovation you will unleash. And that is also the objective of the Special Technology Zone Authority that's been set up by the government recently, to help attract this kind of talent and bring this kind of innovation up, right, on this one. So here, when we talk about the business model itself, two sets of APIs. And what we mean by that is a software which is called Open Banking Compliance Solution. All the regulator need to do is make sure, okay, yes, this solution is there. It's already working in many other markets. There is no reason why Pakistan cannot implement it very quickly and be a fast follower on that one. It connects to the core, this software or this platform connects to the core banking system of banks. And it comes up with, regulatory, which is basic, as well as, consented, a strong customer authentication, authorization. The digital identity is the fundamental concept, right? So these are the one set of APIs, and then value-added APIs. So start with minimum, right? I mean, and allow this thing first. On the other hand, in parallel, what these open banking companies like ours will do, and there are Saltesh, TokenEye, a number of others in the market, Bud, in the region here is us, Tarabot, others, right? What they do is, when I get all this information from a bank in a controlled, systematic manner, this is the gateway through which account information services I will collate, aggregate, clean up, and provide, right? And this is how I'm going to help on the payment side. And this POS, and this terminal thing on the micro payment side by State Bank is great as well, as SECP is doing wonderful with this P2P and other businesses coming up, right? So all this stuff, we call it the gateway, right? A gateway, rather than having everyone having a pipe trying to connect with every bank, there are 4 or 5 or 10 of these companies who build these gateways and who connect with banks. And as a result, they're able to do data aggregation and mixing it with alternate data to come up with certain use cases for end customers, right? Achha, in the international market, all these three conceptually can be the same company, but typically this dark blue shaded is done by one set of businesses, and this light blue shade is then a separate set of business, simply because the kind of focus etc. requires, and also it's not very capital intensive to launch, right? So you can really have these youngsters, to come up with these ideas, replicate what's going well in other markets, in emerging markets, and bring it to Pakistan as well. In very simple terms, this is the business model. If I want to go a little bit visual into account information services, what does that mean? By the way, what that means is these are a type of information that you can choose to allow or not allow. So Bilal sir, in UK, for example, they have allowed account information sharing only of deposit account, jahan se payments ho rahi hai, right? People are making payments. However, Australia, that has been a lot more successful, has also allowed sharing information on, for example, mortgages, loans, credit cards, and everything. And Bahrain a year back started by replicating UK and saying, okay, only account information. But then they said, why? And we are only going slow because we are learning, right? So now the second set of regulation update that is coming in this year, first half this year, you will see will allow a number of other type of banking data to be shared as well in a controlled manner, right? Now going back, the way it happens is right now, if I'm with HBL, I look at HBL account, then I look at UBL, then I look at Bank Islamic, then I look at Meezan, then I look at Al Baraka, right, etc. Now what we are saying is, because of account information services provider in between, right, who have aggregated the data, if you go back, who have aggregated the data through these regulatory and APIs, are able to aggregate everything here. And the customer, just because they have access to this app, is able to see all their bank information as well as other whatever kind of information they need using this app. Now, the advantage for Islamic banks like Meezan or like Bank Islami or like Dubai Islamic, whatever, is they can be the first movers and they themselves can become AISP as well. So UK allowed licensing to these banks to become AISP as well. So kya hota hai? Okay, because what data says is customers are likely to make their primary bank the AISP as well, right? The aggregator as well, right? As opposed to the secondary bank. However, if these banks are late to move, what will happen is there are other regulators not going to stop others coming up as well. And there could be independent, yeah, like Yolt is there, Bud is there, right? Saltage is there. They are there and they've taken huge market share. And right now, when we talk of international banks like HSBC, like Ashar, I was talking to them in UK, they are paying $1 million per year subscription fee as well as per user fee to these AISPs, right? And by the way, they are getting a lot of good ROI on that because the kind of information they are able to get, they are able to put it to use. And Islamic banks are no different, right? So what you are saying is you are making life for customers very easy through this AISP. This is another depiction of how it works, that all these different banks are there. By the way, we call our new entity that we are applying for license from CBB Aspire, right? So what's going to happen? This is actually from our strategy document. So what these different banks are going to do is they are going to link, there will be a major pipe here, and we are going to link with all these different APIs of different banks, which are of different qualities, and going to save hassle for all these new entrants to the financial services industry to not being able to do each individual integration with each one of them, right? So they will integrate with us, we will integrate, we'll integrate with all the banks on the other side, and we will be the AISP, right, on this one. So this is just one example, but this is how it works. On the payment side, I know I'm taking a lot of time. On the payment side, I've already summarized that it is about taking the middleman and the acquirer out. In simple terms, this is what it means. When the payment initiation services provider is there, then what it means is the issuer bank and the merchant will be able to do direct transactions without the acquirer and the card network. And this is already happening. And businesses are becoming financial institutions in this manner, right? And there's no reason why in Pakistan also we cannot bring this cost and complexity down, right? And really, and therefore make digital, or app-based transactions or payments a lot bigger and more. And this is how things happen, right? I mean, you're on an e-commerce website, for example, you decide what do you want to buy, and then with a click of a button, all these banks are integrated in this app. If you think about it, with this AISP, right? So they ask you, okay, which bank you are with. If that bank is not there, of course, you cannot do. But if the bank is there, you can choose that bank. You give consent. This is where, again, regulator has a very important role to play. A very strong authentication consent management system should be in place. And with a click of button and selfies and digital identity, you are able to conclude the transaction without Visa, MasterCard. And the beauty is the cost of setting up this infrastructure has also come down massively. So this is just simply an intro that I would want to give a heads up, open banking is going to be a game changer for Islamic for all financial institutions, including Islamic, right? Let me take a 30-second pause here. How do you feel, Bilal Saab, Ahmed, any feedback on how Pakistan is looking at this?
Well, I'm very excited, Ashar. I mean, you've really cleared my mind. There are a lot of things that I didn't understand. I'm much clearer. I'm very excited, actually. And it, I think this is not a game changer. I think this is a watershed in financial history. I'm not even going to say Islamic finance. I'm just saying it's definitely, the change is scary, but I think the opportunity is, is very, very large as well. So excellent, Ashar, for, just clearing the concepts and everything. Excellent presentation.
Ahmed?
Yeah, sure. I think what I like to also mention that there are
we are still quite behind in this in Pakistan, but I have seen certain segments where we are now, I think, moving in this direction. For example, I just share that probably in the next month you will, or maybe in the next 2 months, you will hear this something called Asan mobile account, which is probably a 30-second account opening process coming up. So maybe we are, and similarly these P2P payments using these wallets, because State Bank of Pakistan has allowed electronic money institutions. So now these companies are now integrating with the banks through this open network. And third thing, probably we for bankers, we need to more use cases to understand this, because as you mentioned that a non-technical person will be lost in these jargons, but if we know that Mr. Ashar is talking about how I can double my car's finance, how I can reduce my cost by 50%, how I can get 10,000 customers in 20 days without opening branches, probably that will excite our side of the people or our bankers to become more open. But the good news is we have seen this discussion. We have maybe we are not technologically so ahead, but now banks are talking about it. And the other opportunity that I see is that this you can because this mobile technology or this technology is easier to adopt. So you don't need a large scale manufacturing setup in Pakistan to become the next. So you need some smart people, some smart companies, and some probably strategic vision to leap forward by using these type of things. So this is my
thank you very much, Bilal sir. Thank you very much. But I would want to highlight, as again someone very passionate about Islamic finance, right, like yourselves, I would like to highlight that we are at the risk of missing out on this opportunity for two reasons, right? And I just cannot emphasize that this may take 30 seconds. Like, I just cannot emphasize that the cost of this can be next 10 years, 15 years playing catching up. Those two reasons are, as students of Islamic finance, a big majority of us is still stuck on, okay, yeah, if I'm passionate about Islamic finance, what it means is I should understand Sharia very well. And, again, the products very well and governance very well, right? I feel that is important, but 80% of that has been addressed already by the previous generation over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Right? If we are passionate about it, then we need to be, using hikmat. We need to understand that we need to be able to speak this language. And if you're not able to relate to this language, then as industry leaders, we will be left behind, and we are doing a disservice to the next 10 years, 20 years of Islamic finance. And I feel Sharia scholars, product managers, risks professionals, consultants, bankers, we are not giving enough attention here to understand what this is, to understand the kind of massive, this dramatic change that is coming our way, right? So as leaders, I believe that we need to emphasize this, and students, we need to emphasize this, number one. Number two, the big risk, huge risk, is the leadership, and I can openly now say, leadership of banks, right, of big institutions are not cut out. Most of them are not cut out to lead this change. Like, some of them who are smart, and not everyone will be, right? I mean, this is a standard law, right? Like 20% honge jo ahead of the curve honge, 80% will be followers. But that 20% need to be very vocal. Yes, we've been thinking about technology in a certain way for the last 20, 30 years. I will never be able to relate to it, but I need to trust the likes of Ahmed, the likes of others, etc., to say, yeah, run with it, build this ecosystem, right? Work with them. We'll open up the bank in a controlled manner. That we are not seeing enough. In the region here, I will say there are a few banks who've been very, call it the hedge funds of the Islamic finance, or the risk takers or the risk seekers, but most of them are absolutely sleeping, right? They're still going with a very traditional mindset. Core banking is very legacy. How do I write off this much amount? Blah, blah, blah. They're doing a disservice, I would say. So I'll be very strong critical here that, we are at the risk of losing this once in a 10-year opportunity. If, number one, as Islamic finance practitioners, we don't familiarize ourselves with this language, right? This new language that is emerging, the business models. Number two, the leadership at these big institutions need to become a lot more open and quickly. Otherwise, a 60-year-old trying to address the needs of a 25-year-old, or in 10 years' time, who will become a third, is simply not, we're not seeing. Sorry, I'm on a tangent here. So
no, thank you, Ashar, for, earlier I said I was scared, now I'm terrified, because you very aptly pointed out the two reasons why this may not be successful. But I think, I'm going to concede, and I'm going to take on the responsibility as the regulator. I think the regulatory regime would also be responsible for the success or failure. And if you ask why I'm terrified, is that everyone's talking about the supply side and all, and the demand side and everything, but there is a regulator who needs to sit down and sort of lay down the tracks on which the train is going to run. And if the train is just running out there without any tracks, it's going to road roll a lot of stuff. So I think my next webinar should be on RegTech, and we need to get going on that. So
100%.
it's the I always speak analogically that it's the Quran and the ayahs first, and then the subsidiary jo bhi ahkam hai and the other jo hamare principles hai. But we need to subscribe and practice what is the primary jo hamare jo cheezein, jo principles or wo regulations where. So regulation, I think, is very important. You've got me, okay, you've woken me up. So I think a big area that needs to be looked at. And I would appreciate any suggestions, and if you've done any work, if you've seen.
Happy to connect with yourselves right now. As I said, we are connecting with the Central Bank of Bahrain, with Central Bank of Saudi, and everyone is learning right now. And honestly, even we are not experts, right? हमने भी जाके think tanks create किए हैं by connecting with the UK market, etc., bringing them on such webinars like this, and learning from them as well. So I guess once the mindset changes, everything else follows. Honestly, the only thing is about mind. And we are very quick to blame banks and leadership, etc. Even myself, right? I mean, me and all 78 participants on here, we've got to ask ourselves how much we are doing, right? I mean, charity starts from home. So okay. So in the interest of time, if I can just take maybe 2 minutes, I don't have a lot of time on blockchain. I'm not going to get into details of blockchain. That can be a huge subject by itself. All I will say is, once you understand blockchain, right, and I've tried to simplify it, then the Islamic angle to it is around smart contracts, right? Of course, there's a business reason, etc., to it as well, but it's about smart contracts, and then it's about the governance around it as well. Very similar to what is relevant to any platform, right? And thinking on that is in very initial stages, right? So, but this is a huge revolution. We need to stay connected with it. I don't think so it's coming in the next 1 year or 2 years, but it's definitely coming in a massive way. Yes, digital currencies as well as the likes of Bitcoin and Ethereum, we are hearing, are doing quite well, and they're all driven by this blockchain concept. So we need to have a better understanding of that. From an Islamic angle, it's more about, again, the principles of speculations, principles of, smart contracts, how the contracts are written, are the Sharia compliant or not, how the governance is. But otherwise, from a business model perspective, this is what it is, right? I mean, it helps bring down the cost. It helps, take care of the information asymmetry. It gives a lot more autonomy to the participants. Trade finance is a massive area that absolutely will get reinvented as a result, as well as global payments, right? So a number of use cases, and I think we need to focus as non-tech people on the use cases and the business model rather than the technology, because that itself is a massive area. In the interest of time, what I will say is, and I'm not going to get into all these details, I've mentioned this last time as well, these are the new face of risk, right? The 8 most important risks which we do not understand, or which we've not been trained as bankers and regulators in today's world to take care of it, right? Collaboration, right? Ecosystem management, when I'm not controlling everything. Data flows, sharing and usage, where different parts of business are moving at different space. Growth of utilities, which means national KYC. What is the liability model going to look like, right? And if something does go wrong, is the bank responsible, or this national KYC? So who's responsible to where? A lot of conversations happening, right, on these ones. But what I want to touch base upon is, again, some business questions I will leave with you is, but given the Islamic finance industry, Bilal Sahab, as you said, is relatively smaller, and we are grounded in being purpose-led, has a lot to gain from fintech-based business models. And what that means is the change that is happening is, pehle baat hoti thi the scale, economies of scale around assets. Now we are talking about data, right? I tell you, if Pakistan can specialize in this area, we are going to catch up on the last 20 years lost, right? I mean, that we have. Similarly, we are talking about hyper personalization. And I was just thinking about from an Islamic angle, you know, we think we are champions in personalization. Imagine Allah Ta'ala who's looking at this galaxy and everyone and still giving hyper personalized attention to us. Can we bring even a symptom of that to financial services as well? With some of these technologies, now we can, right? Exclusivity of relationship, very important. They're not just nice words. Banks used to pride themselves कि जब मेरे पास एक customer आ गया is not going to leave me for next 10 years, and that's what used to happen, right? Now what we are saying is there's a lot more that is happening, with all these new entrants, etc., coming in. Switching costs and therefore mobility has become a lot easier, and technology. So again, as given that we are passionate about Islamic finance, we need to look beyond just the Sharia aspect and talk about the business model aspect and see how business can be made Sharia compliant and scalable. And if I want to end by again aligning it to the spirit of Islamic finance, we talk about being purpose-led, right? The questions there, the discussion and the trade-offs there need to talk about, should we start with peer-to-peer lending or peer-to-peer financing, or should we peer-to-business to start with? So for example, also from a fiduciary responsibility perspective as well, do you want to promote consumption debt, right? Very important point. Or do you want to direct resources towards more productive sector and therefore a peer-to-business kind of platforms or licenses, right? Or something that is now right now very famous in the world, buy now, pay later, call it buy now, regret later as well, right? Is that something, how aligned is it to the Islamic finance principle, again, of consumption-driven economy, right? To build an inclusive system, you talked about RegTech. Within RegTech, digital identity and open data will be absolutely critical. We talked about a number of times bridging financial and real economy. I believe that, with artificial intelligence and the level of personalization we are seeing that is now has come into being, and financial well-being, right? Prince Charles actually, in one of the conferences said, and it has stuck in my mind when he came to Bahrain, he said, you talk about Islamic principle is about risk sharing. I want to put on the table, how's that risk sharing happening between this generation and next generation? Right? How are you being responsible towards your next generation? So here also, in a very smaller way, what we are saying is in financial well-being it's not just about point of sale, jahan pe if bank is entering, can the bank actually enter the customer's life into the point of intent? Because of technology is possible, right? I mean, a 25-year-old wanting to buy a car or a mortgage in 5 years time, 8 years time, no one is excited about a mortgage. People are excited about a house buying journey. That journey could be 5 years pre-buying and 10 years, 15 years post-buying, right? So can we actually move the focus using this technology to point of intent instead of being point of sale? And as a result of which, can we bring that customer experience, that feedback loop? We give voice to the customer, get feedback. Yeah, you know what? My money I'm putting in bank A and they're only putting in treasury. Is that good? Well, it is serving a certain purpose. It is helping the public sector when the government needs it most. Versus another one, which is actually have a big portfolio in SME portfolio, and that is creating employment, right? So it is that kind of relevance we have to bring to the mind of the customer. With technology, it is possible. And then tomorrow I can vote with my money. You know what? Bank Islami is doing a lot more entrepreneurial stuff, but my thinking is more towards, I don't know, affordable housing. And Meezan is doing a lot more affordable housing portfolio and is growing. So can I somehow, tell them with voting with my money that, I like this and this is what I'm thinking. Mera return on my deposit is not going to go up, but at least I can help direct the movement of money in the economy. I guess what I'll end up with is we have an opportunity as Islamic finance leaders to actually shape the thinking process of the next 10 years, 15 years to come, and not be hostage to what we've been doing in the last 20 years. That's it, sir. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ashar. Thank you on behalf of SECP and IBA. Guess what? You will be in the next few webinars with us.
Inshallah, my pleasure, sir.
I am offering the participants, if there are any suggestions for webinars, if there's something that needs to be looked into more detail, something you don't understand, we are open to suggestions, and we can have experts like Ashar join us, Ahmed as well. So we have a lot of talent, just tell us and we can arrange the webinar. Ahmed, thank you very much for once again coordinating and arranging this webinar. Ashar, from my side, I look forward to meeting you more
Inshallah,
in
sir.
the future. And do you want to take any questions? I think the time is up. So
the time is up. I believe if I can request Ahmed and Zia, the presentation I'll make available. I've just gone through these questions.
Yeah, I think there have been some requests for the copy of the presentation, if you can send that on. Yeah. So Ahmed, Jazakallah.
So thank you, Ashar, for a wonderful session. And as mentioned by Bilal Saab, a lot of new things, wake-up calls, some more learning about how to move ourselves, how to move Islamic finance forward. And I think we need to all actually focus more on these emerging trends, need to understand and how to apply them in Pakistan, in our different Islamic financial institutions. We will share the presentation by Mr. Ashar Nazim on the Facebook of IBS-CEIF. We will share the link there, so people can download the slides and they can use. The video recording is also available on IBS-CEIF Facebook. And so inshallah we will share, you can also listen back once to this session again if you need to, or you can refer to other people as well. So with these, there are a couple of questions, but because of the shortage of time, we have to conclude the session for today. So I like to thank Ashar Nazim once again on behalf of IBS-CEIF, and I like to thank Mr. Bilal Rasul Saab for working with us with IBS-CEIF and highlighting, bringing these latest topics for our audience. So Bilal Saab, thank you. Ashar Saab, thank you. And I also like to thank all the participants who have joined us today. I am very happy to see participants from UK, from Malaysia, from Bahrain, from Bangladesh, from I think Sri Lanka. And so this was a global, this is I think the global reach as well. So people were interested from different part of the world for this session. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And inshallah we will be bringing up more of these sessions in the days to come. And thank you once again, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.